But first of all, hey, congratulations on how do you pronounce this? Kaali Khuli?
Kaali Khuli?
Kukuhi, yes.
Yeah.
Which means what? The well, right?
It means the dark well or the black well.
Oh, excellent. Well,
hmm
first of all, congratulations for the film being on Netflix. How does it feel about that?
It's it's awesome. I mean, especially so I come from a world where my films play at film festivals, which is great, but it can also be very limiting. And this is a Netflix original, so they didn't acquire the film. They actually greenlit it from the script stage, so we always knew that it was going to release globally on Netflix. We weren't sure, like, would we go the festival route? Uh, but it's a pandemic. Theaters are in essence shut down, and festivals are not happening, or they're online, so it couldn't be a perfect time to release a film.
Yeah, it is. A lot of people are streaming and
Yeah.
watching things from home. So where the original idea actually came from for something like this?
The original idea, I was trying to think the other day. I'm always kind of like, as something's brewing, it's generally from like a lot of different places. I knew that I wanted to go back to my village to make my first feature film. I had made short films there before. It's the village that I grew up in as a child, and it's very much a part of like my childhood storytelling landscape. And I wanted to explore not only this issue of gender violence and kind of family history, but I also wanted to tap into these ghost stories that I had been told as a child that I grew up with. And my mother is a Punjabi poet and writer, and I'm definitely, kind of moving in that lineage. Although not, most women there, they're not making cinema. There's really not, Punjabi women directors. There's very few, actually. There are them, there's a few. And so I'm drawing from that history and that lineage, which is like Urdu and Punjabi poetry. The film is very much that in its essence and core.
Uh-huh.
And so I think it was just a number of things that came together. And I also wanted to make something small. So it's my first feature. I wanted one location, which was the village. In essence, it's a small village. There's two homes. There's the well and the fields, and then you have these, narrow, windy alleyways. And it's, it's not the same village, but it's practically the village that I grew up in as a kid. So I'm very much, kind of honing from just my childhood imagination and stories, and then also tapping into family history.
Hey, tell me about this village that you actually use. I mean, obviously, a lot of us aren't from India, so we wouldn't know where where this is. But could you tell us more about the location that you actually use? Is it mostly local actors that you used? I'm assuming.
So, I mean, India is such an interesting country because it's just so vast and huge, and there's so many cultures. Just I'm specifically from Punjab, which is very different than, say, the South or Rajasthan. So, the village that we shot in is right on the border of Punjab and Pakistan. So it's, in the West. And it's, during partition, Punjab was just basically, divided in half by the British. And, it's the largest mass migration of humans, and really horrific history, millions and millions of people murdered and died, and it's just Punjab has this horrific history. So anyways, this village that we shot in sits right on the border of Punjab and Pakistan. There's farmers in the village that we shot in. During the day they go out into their fields, and their fields are in essence in Pakistan. You can see the fence, and there's military everywhere. So, and it's about an hour away from the village that I lived in as a child, which is my grandfather's village. when we were shooting in high summer. So the daytime is, 110, 120 degrees.
Hmm.
It's very rural. And, but we built a world that was supposed to take place in this winter fairy tale landscape. So half of our shoot days were nighttime. We're working with rain machines. Had this incredible cinematographer who built a world where you can't tell it takes place in the summer.
Yeah. Wow. Did you mainly use local actors, or you basically?
Oh, right. So yes and no. We worked with, one of my favorite Indian actresses, Shabana Azmi, who's like the grande dame of Indian cinema, especially parallel cinema, which is art house cinema in India. She's been working for 40 years, and was, like in Deepa Mehta's Fire, and she's just this classical actor. So she's, in the film. A lot of our leads are from Bombay, because that's, where the main Indian film industry is. I mean, it's just so massive there. They make more films than, Hollywood. So a lot of our actors were from there. And then we also worked with local Punjabi actors. We had this great local casting director. I mean, I had this amazing casting director, Adore Mukherjee, in Bombay, who, built the lead actors. And then we had a local casting director who, he is himself a theater director. And so he just, basically I gave him freedom to cast some really wonderful people. I mean, I worked with him, of course, and, had final say, but he just knew how to find amazing actors. I worked with Jitinder Kaur, who is a very well-known local Punjabi actress. She plays the crone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really exciting to work with her. And then Samuel John, I always wanted to work with him. He's actually a friend. He's a revolutionary theater artist, and he's always, working on social issues, a lot of stuff that has to do with like anti-caste, anti-class, racism, colorism. He's just like, he's feminist, he's Marxist, he's just this really cool guy. He was in the film. So we had this really interesting behind the scenes world that we built with our cast and our crew. And then our child actors were so phenomenal. And, you might not know it, but in essence, it was very much like a family film.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter came, who was the same age as the girls in the film. She's in the final scene. And my husband is my lead collaborator and co-writer. I primarily work with him, so we co-wrote the screenplay together. So there's a lot of, fun stuff going on behind camera.
Talk more about your lead actress. What's her name? Riva? Am I correct?
Uh-huh. Yeah, so her name is Riva Arora. And this is her first lead. She's in quite a bit of Bollywood films, has smaller roles. And she's in some, television soap operas. And, at the time, she was really young. I mean, she's, when you're that age and you're a child, you're just at the cusp of kind of moving into this tween world.
Mm-hmm.
So now, like within like a year and a half, she's become this tween. And I'm like, oh my God, Riva, you've grown up so much. So it's just like, there's this little moment, where we work together, where she's just, she was right at that cusp, and she was just so phenomenal to work with. Like, she just, I was always checking in with her, like, are you okay? Like, are you up for doing this? Like, dragging another child through the mud and the rain. And she just, she owned it. She's very committed to the craft of acting. She's such a natural, and she loves it. It's really, really phenomenal to work with her.
Wow, it sounded like you just directed a little adult rather than a child on set.
Yeah, I mean, I love working with kids, and so we definitely built in a lot of play. And when the kids were not on set, like my daughter was also with us, so they were playing Legos or swimming, and that was the time. I think kids are still into slime, but they were all like super obsessed with slime, so they're always like doing slime. I mean, there was definitely a lot of playfulness, and I think being a mother myself really helped in working with them, because you can't work with kids the same way that you work with adults. And of course, even with the adult actors, they're also different. Each actor requires a different methodology in the way that they work, and you can't expect them to work the way that you're working. Your job as a director is to understand that they each have their own needs and need their own way of bringing their best selves to the character and the script.
So how do you approach a kid or direct a kid in a horror movie? Because I understand directing kids in movies, but a horror movie it's entirely something different especially for a child.
For sure. Well, first of all, the film is not, it's not a slasher film. It's not violent so much on screen. Of course, the violence is in the act that's occurring, and what's being addressed. And the way that I approached this with them was as a storyteller. So I was telling them a fairy tale. This is the fairy tale, and these are the characters that you are in this fairy tale. Like when Reva and I first met, we sat down and we watched, Guillermo del Toro's work. I picked little things, that I thought that she would understand and take away from, and what I wanted her to embody. So it was really what I wanted, because really the film it's a fairy tale. It's a very dark ghost story fairy tale. There's a lot of allegory in it. So I approached it from that world where I do believe that children understand that, because Shivangi, the character that Reva plays, she has access to the ghosts. She has empathy, and that veil, that world is very thin for her, whereas the adults don't understand that world, and then when they are confronted with it, they're completely incapable of understanding how to deal with it. But a child understands that. And of course, I'm channeling whatever was going on with me as a kid. So I don't think it was that difficult for the children to get into that world. And then, when I expected them to do something like, bite somebody's arm or scream or whatever, it was really playful and fun. Like, for example, there is a scene where Baby is possessed and she bites Shivangi. Now, me and my ADs, we were surrounding her, yelling, "Beast, beast, beast," like it was like channeling this beast. So we tried to make it playful. That's what I tried to do, build some playfulness and build it as like we were telling a fairy tale.
I keep on thinking back of all the black gunk that comes out of people's mouth, which to me looks terrifying, but I guess it's something entirely different on for you guys. But that's terrific.
Yeah. I mean, that is, in essence, the poison that's given to the baby.
Yeah.
And really, it was just like toothpaste and charcoal. It was just like, oh my gosh, my poor team, like, they're the ones that had to test it out before we actually shot it. It was fun. We had a lot of fun on set doing this.
I bet. I've watched a few Indian scary movies before, and one of the most common things that I noticed that they're all like sort of like ghost stories. Is that like a common theme, like in India, it's like to tell ghost stories?
I'm not sure, but I think that the supernatural and ghosts are very much woven into the fabric of the culture. I mean, I can speak specifically for Punjabi culture. Ghosts were just like a part of, and I mean, I grew up my father was a Marxist. I grew up in a home where we were in essence atheists, and we were still, my mother was still talking about ghosts, and it reminds me very much of my my kind of family. My best friend Janine, she's from Mexico, and it was just like in her home, like her tias and grandmother, and then her mother Margarita, who's my tia, like was just ghosts. You just talk about ghosts as if like they're there in the home and they're part of your family, and there is no question of whether they exist or don't exist. So that was the same with us. Like in the village, in my grandfather's home, the home that I lived in, the house next to us, which is just like burned in my memory, that house was talked about as the haunted house where these things happened, and there was no question of whether they happened or not. It was like fact. Like, yes, it's haunted. There's these ghosts that live there. Do this and don't do that. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's definitely part of the fabric of Indian culture, and for sure Punjabi culture.
Terrific. And I know you had a lot of experience prior to this with a lot of short films. What did you bring from that experience onto your first feature film, something like this?
Well, I actually, that's interesting that you say that. I never feel like I have a lot of experience. You always feel like, everything you're doing, it's like, what am I doing? And I do think that making a short is very different than making a feature. It's just, it's a different art form. And, what we had to build with the feature was just this world that we knew we were going to live with for many years. With the short, I'm used to doing shorts that are very, DIY punk rock, like you just get a couple people together and you do it guerrilla style. And that's not what happened with the feature. It was lengthy and longer, and we had executives and producers and, kind of a windy road. But I think that my experience working in particular with children, people, they always say like, don't work with kids and don't work with animals. Well, all my films always have kids and animals. Yeah. So I think coming from that kind of scrappy guerrilla filmmaking world and working with kids and animals, and having worked in India in my village before, definitely gave me some of those things that I needed to make the feature.
So are you more confident on doing this again for another feature film?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely know the mistakes I made. So, it's like I had a crash course all over again. And yeah, for sure. I feel a lot more confident. I mean, I, went into something that, you go in and you trust, you trust that something beautiful is going to happen. And I'm really proud of what we made. And I think another thing, that I brought to the feature, which came from working in that guerrilla style filmmaking, was that, when you're directing, it's like, and it's not to say something, I'm not saying something bad by saying compromise, but you are constantly working with things that are uncertain. Like there was a scene that we had to cut. You don't know if, your rain machine stops working, your generator blows out, somebody gets sick. You're constantly having to adjust and collaborate and shift things. And I think that if you get rigid and you are attached to something, you're going to find that it's very difficult to make films, especially in the way that we did. And so I think that you have to constantly be open to change, and what you get on the page is not going to be what you get in that edit room. But, of course, you move through it with intention and with clarity as much as possible. But you have to be willing to adjust and shift and collaborate and be open to change.
Absolutely. And do you want to stick with Indian films, or would you like to try to take a hack at an American one down the road?
Excuse me. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I have a number of screenplays I'm in LA. I have a number of screenplays that take place here. Um, I have, a couple of pilots that are out. One of the pilots takes place in India, so that's a series in India. And then I have another pilot that I've developed that takes place on the border because I grew up partially in Blyas, TJ. So, that would be like a writer's room situation. Yeah, I mean, I think of myself as really an international filmmaker and international storyteller. So I'm not interested in just staying in one place. Of course, I'm very committed to making cinema for my culture and about my culture. I mean, that's really important and critical to me to have that voice and what I'm interested in exploring. But I'm certainly interested in doing things here. There's something that we're developing that takes place in Yuba City, and Yuba City has a very large Punjabi and Latino population, and this old history of Punjabi and Latino families that are migrant farm workers. So it's making a film in the US doesn't have to be like a white story, of course. So but I'm not only interested in identity either. It is in essence just always going to be part of what I do. But story first. Story is always the most important.
Storytelling is always important. Absolutely. One more thing before I let you go, Terrie. Obviously, it's crazy times that we're experiencing right now. You're in Los Angeles. You probably haven't traveled back to India in quite some time. But how are you staying sane and creative during times like this?
I don't know how anybody is. Like, I feel so crazy. There's this election. I feel really anxious, nervous. Just there's a lot of people. I just feel like there are just so many issues that are just left to the wayside, and I feel responsible and unable to really take action. I mean, I've done things like, we were writing letters to, voters to get out and vote. Of course, I called my mom and made sure she walked in her ballot, and I've called like everybody that I've known and, tried to do some phone baking. My daughter's at home, so I'm in essence like back in the 5th grade. So I'm also like, basically in school. And, most of my friends are out of work. Like my sister's a music supervisor. She's out of work right now. All of my friends who are creatives are, just, I guess we're all in it together. So that's one thing that I do know. And as far as being creative, I'm trying really hard not to have certain expectations of myself. I think there's, you hear these, like, I think I heard like Christopher Nolan's written this many screenplays while he's been in quarantine. And it's just like, yeah, I cannot hold myself to that standard at all. And it shouldn't be expected. We become so desensitized to things that it's like this becomes normal. It's like, no, this is not normal.
Mm-hmm.
It is totally okay to be angry and upset and be like, I don't know what the hell is going on, and I'm exhausted and I'm tired. I think we're all very exhausted. But okay, so back to your question, just really quickly. Although I don't know what's going to happen in this industry, I don't know about money, I don't know about jobs, I don't know about contracts. What I do know is that screenwriting and storytelling is a place of creative liberation for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I have been developing some things and I have been writing. I just don't have the same expectation of the number of pages as I used to for myself. But when I do get into that world, it's definitely a safe space, and it does feel really, really wonderful. And I'm able to kind of deflect I mean, of course, I'm reflecting all the shit that's going on, but I'm also able to deflect it. So if I can get into that space, it's definitely liberating and healing.
Terrific. Well, hey, at least for 2020, you got a movie out on Netflix.
It's
So,
true.
that's
Yeah.
that's a great accomplishment compared to a lot of people who are struggling right
Yeah, it's so true, you know, and I'm so grateful. And I mean, we literally, you know, finished post in a pandemic. I had to get on a flight in the middle of the night because India was going on lockdown, and we didn't know if I was going to be able to get on a plane, and I had to come back to my daughter. So, you know, the way that we finished the film, I'm really grateful for this, you know, to be able to have a film in this super insane thing that's happening.
That's true. Well, I'm glad you're safely back here in the United States. Well, hey, congratulations once again. Thank you, Terrie, for speaking with me about your film.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really fun.
Hey, not a problem. Thank you. Bye now.
Okay, bye.